This is the Town of Lancaster Conservation Commission meeting of April 23rd, 2024. I will call the roll. Could everyone please mute? I hear some background noise. Bruce McGregor?
Here.
Jim LaValle?
Here.
Dennis Hubbard?
Here.
Tom Seidenberg is also here. We also have Brad Stone, the new Lancaster Conservation Agent. Welcome aboard, Brad.
Thank you.
Happy to have you. I don't know, Brad, if you want to introduce yourself to the board.
Yep, all right, there's my video. Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Brad Stone. I just started here last week. For those of you that haven't met me already, I've been in the conservation industry for a good 25 years now. I spent most of my municipal career wearing multiple hats as a municipal engineer and also a conservation agent with a heavy emphasis on stormwater as well. I grew up born and raised nearby in Leominster. I'm still living there. I'm very excited to be here.
Welcome to Lancaster, Brad. Welcome.
We're very happy to have you on board, Brad. Thanks. All right. First item up on the agenda, we have continued notice of intent for Zero Heritage Lane. We did just get a continuance request to our next meeting, which will be May 14th. So I'd be happy to take a motion for that.
I'll make a motion to continue to May 14th.
Second.
Sorry, Dennis.
Nope, you got it.
All right, so motion was made by Bruce and seconded by Dennis to continue to May 14th. Any further discussion?
Jim got the second.
Sorry. Oh, Jim got the second. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, this will be a roll call vote. Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Jim LaValle.
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard.
Aye.
Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. So this is continued to May 14th.
Just ask who got the first there.
The first was Bruce. Second was Jim.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem, Ross. Next up on our agenda is a continued notice of intent for 10 Fire Road 54. This is also going to be continued to May 14th. Can I have a motion?
Tom, did they request May 14th? Is that enough time for them?
I believe they did. I'll
Okay.
just quickly check my email to make sure. I'm pretty sure that was specifically requested to the next meeting.
Sorry, it's just the second continuance in a row. So
Yes, so yes, we did get specific requests to the 14th of May.
all right, thank you.
Yep.
I'll make a motion. We'll continue to May 14th.
And I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion made by Jim, seconded by Dennis to continue 10 Fire Road 54 to May 14th. Any further discussion? This will be a roll call vote. Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Jim LaValle.
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard.
Aye.
Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. Next up on the agenda, we have a continued notice of intent for 320 Bolton Road. I see Fernando online and Bob Parente. Okay. So we did finally receive the EP number and comments. Bob, do you want to bring us up to date? Do you have responses to their comments? Bob, can you hear me? Bob Parente? Fernando Silva, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am.
I don't know if you can contact Bob if he's able to access the meeting. He's not coming off mute.
Yeah, I think he's on. He's online now. Let me. Yeah, he said he's just signing in. Can I? Let me ask him to respond. He's tried to unmute, but he can't. He's
Okay,
tried,
Tom,
but
maybe.
Oh,
Hi, Tom.
yeah,
Maybe
yes.
we can hear you
Mike-
now. Great.
I might have
Welcome.
forgot to click a button here. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay, so I think that DEP's comments refer to maybe some cross sections if this was a bigger area that we're filling, but we're talking about 6 or 8 inches of fill for the septic system. So I'm not really sure it would apply to this project, but I could be wrong. The area that we're taking out fill for the compensatory, that's only 6 or 8 inches deep also. So if we're filling 4 or 5 feet and then compensatory 3 or 4 feet for a bigger area, we might be applicable to this, but I would have to call DEP to confirm that what they're asking for might not be applicable here. A cross section would be difficult to draw for 8 inches filled. It's only 30 feet across. That cross-hatched area on my plan on the existing conditions. So I would have to defer to the commission whether or not they want me to contact DEP. All this work in the floodplain is really just for the septic system, which Fernando needs to build in order to have a viable septic system. The existing, I think we had talked maybe last time, the existing septic system, the cesspool, is 4 or 5 feet deep. So it's in the groundwater. So this is 100% improvement for the property. And like I mentioned, I'm not sure DEP exactly paid attention to what we're doing, but I'm not sure.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Brad, have you gotten a chance to review the materials for this hearing?
So I gave it a cursory review, as you know, trying to catch up on a number of things. So what I didn't see on the plan was, you know, cross section aside. So my question to the engineer is, how did you justify the numbers on the compensatory storage? So that's the biggest concern, is as long as you can prove to us that you've done that. I understand what you're saying in terms of the amount of fill and cut isn't large in depth, but the performance standards still require that your compensatory storage is done at like elevations for your fill.
Okay, good question, I guess. So I marked out the area of the fill. So we have 0 fill at the edges and maybe around a foot of fill in the middle. So I used an average of 8 inches of fill for the entire area, and that's how I calculated the volume of the fill. And then I did the same thing for the compensatory area. So if it's 0 on the edges where we're not filling, and let's say a foot at the highest point, I use 8 inches, which is a little bit of overkill. It's probably more like an average of 6 inches of fill over the entire area. So area times depth would give me a volume, which is what I listed in the notice of intent under the cubic. I think it's cubic feet of fill. I forget which page that's on, but so it's similar to doing a cross section. It's just this is such a small area. It's not really conducive to a cross section. It's basically an area times depth.
Okay. I mean, you could conceivably do cross sections regardless of how deep you're going. I'm not suggesting I personally necessarily want to see that. That was just DEP's feedback there. Again, the two important things would be making sure you've got the volume, and it sounds like what you're telling me, if I understand correctly, is that your cut volume for compensatory meets your fill volume, correct?
We have more compensatory storage, I think, it listed
Okay,
in those.
so
We have
meets
additional
or exceeds.
compensatory.
Okay, so then the other thing I would just want clarification on, is it done at like elevation?
Is it done? What do you mean?
So in other words, if you're filling, without looking at your plan, if you're if you're filling between elevation 100 and 101, for instance, your compensatory would have to be at like elevations. So you can't fill and do compensatory at different elevations.
So the fill area is where the septic's going. That's approximate elevation 236.5. And the compensatory is at elevation roughly 234.5, let's say. So it's within 2 feet, which can't be at the same elevation. The property is not level. The property is not dead level.
Yeah,
That's impossible. That's impossible.
Right. So that's something we'd probably have to look closer at. It really,
Okay.
You can't take out material well below the elevation that you flood for compensatory. So that's going to be already inundated before it gets to that flood level. That's the reason why that DEP or other people reviewing these things ask for the cross sections, because it helps show us that your fill and your compensatory is being done at the same. What we usually ask for is within 1 foot intervals. You're saying you're only filling 6-8 inches, but what you're telling me is that those are over, much different, broader contours than that. So what you really need to show somehow, and the cross sections do it best, is that where you're filling and where you're creating your compensatory is at the same grades. And if you can't do that for some reason, then we probably need to have a discussion why and figure out how you can meet the performance standards for it. Because obviously it's a septic system upgrade. You need to somehow be able to do that project.
Yeah, I'm looking at the proposed addition, which reflects, shows the septic area. You can't dig out an area where you're filling. You can't dig out at the same elevation. The yard is not the same elevation. Just physically impossible. I understand what you're saying, but so the compensatory storage is to provide additional flood storage volume, whether it's 6 inches lower or a foot lower. In the big picture, is really irrelevant as long as he's providing the additional storage.
Yeah, that's not entirely true. It has to be done, like I said, at like elevations. The performance standards are pretty clear there. So the volume is important, but also where it's done elevation wise is important as well.
Okay. On this property, I don't think he can achieve that.
Okay, well that's something I can go through too. Like I said, I've only been able to give it a cursory review.
Right, you just got on board. Yep.
Yeah,
I understand. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Bob, Commission, any further questions or comments?
Just for my education here, Brad, does that address the DEP question?
I don't have that in front of me, so they must have in their comment letter for the file number issuance. I think I remember reading that they were looking for cross sections.
Yeah.
So again, performance standard wise, like I mentioned, it's a very useful tool to anyone reviewing this to show that the applicants provided compensatory at the same elevations where they're proposing fill. If those elevations are way off, it doesn't meet the performance standards.
Okay.
You have the performance standards there, Brad, just so I know exactly what difference in elevation you're talking about? Can you tell? So a foot, 2 feet? So
you typically do it at 1 foot intervals. Okay. So if you can show that all of your fill is within the same 1 foot interval as all of your compensatory storage creation, then you've presumably met the performance standards.
Okay.
But it sounded like, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded like your compensatory was not within that same 12-inch ballpark air range. So it sounded like you told me you were cutting below. And again, that goes back to from what I'm guessing the DEP comments. Cross sections show us that. It's sometimes hard to. I know I'm not going to be able to look at it as we're going through this right now and figure that out on my own. But the cross sections will help us determine that.
I could do a quick cross section through the compensatory area and a cross section through the fill area, I guess, to see if we can meet that, I guess. But the way I look at the lot, the only place to do compensatory is in the backyard. He's not gonna want to do that in the front yard.
Okay.
That would nobody would like that in the neighborhood, so it would look kind of silly. But let me look at my fill areas, and I just pulled the plan back up. I haven't seen it in a while because we waited so long for a DEP number, but let me look at the area that we're filling, and if I can try to get it within a foot, which will make, I think, the commission happy.
Okay. Thanks, Bob.
Yep.
So I guess then you'll be asking for a continuance.
Yeah, if we can you continue to the next meeting, I can take a look at this at the beginning next week and try to get the commission additional, get some more information over to Brad and the commission. Yep.
Okay, sounds good. Commissioners, can I have a motion?
I make a motion that we continue this meeting until May 14th.
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Bruce, seconded by Dennis, to continue to May 14th. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Jim LaValle,
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard,
Aye.
Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. Okay, thank you, everyone. Next up on the agenda, we have a continued notice of intent for McGovern Boulevard. Don't see anyone online for this. Brad, we didn't get a continuance request for this, did we?
Yes, we did get a continuance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Must have missed that. To the 14th.
Correct.
Okay. Happy to take a motion to continue McGovern Boulevard to the 14th of
I'll
May.
Make a motion to continue the McGovern Boulevard to the 14th of May.
Second.
All right, motion's been made by Dennis, seconded by Jim to continue McGovern Boulevard to May 14th. Any further discussion? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote. Jim LaValle,
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard,
Aye.
Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
And Thomas Seidenberg also votes aye. All right, next up on the agenda, we have the enforcement update for 397 Centerbridge Road. Just a brief recap of our discussion last meeting. We had some discussion about how much the violation was still in place. Brad and I did do a quick drive-by when I was showing Brad around town, around the various current sites. Kind of agreed that it looked like the fill was still in place. I don't think that Brian had sent out the letter and the third enforcement order that we had discussed at last meeting. Brad, can you bring us up to date on where we stand with this?
Okay. I did speak to Brian, so that has not gone out. Again, you and I viewed it from the road, Tom. I did go through the enforcement order at least. What I'm missing is I think I was shown photos and things of that nature from previous site walks. I can't find those in our records. So if you happen to have those and you can, get them to me, I would like that for our file. Mainly because I'm actually a little bit concerned with not everything being in the enforcement order, let's say. And one of the things that looking out there from the site and looking at the data online, that there is a floodplain there, and there's not just a floodplain, there's also a floodway there. That wasn't noted in the enforcement order. Normally, I talked conceptually about enforcement with my colleagues in the office. And, my philosophy has always been to get as many departments together to try to ultimately achieve what the commission wants and what everybody in the town hall wants. A lot of times, if there's a conservation violation, there might be a board of health violation at the same time concurrently and something of that nature. That was one of my thoughts with the floodplain as well, to find out who the floodplain administrator for the town might be, to go that angle as well, revise the Conservation Commission's enforcement order and take that approach. My quick cursory review of the floodplain administrator, well, I think that might be me. So I have to confirm that with my colleagues, but it does appear that the conservation agent is the only one I can see mentioned in the floodplain district in the bylaw. So I can reach out to my peers on the state level and see who they have listed in terms of title, things of that nature. But it's real important to not just to address fill in a floodplain from a conservation standpoint, but also because of communities' participation in the National Flood Insurance Program. And in this particular lot, you don't, as I mentioned, you don't just have floodplain, you have floodway. And for those that aren't familiar with the floodway, that's the velocity zone. That's really the more important sections of a floodplain area, where it's the channel, not just the bank, but above and beyond the bank. When your bank overtops, it's where most of your flow needs to move. And that entire property, from what I see, is within the floodway. So any fill there really needs to be taken out. I understand there was some dialogue with DEP as well about their willingness, or when they might be willing, for instance, to get involved with enforcement. It's always nice to get state officials to, do what they can on their end without involving, a cost of town council, things of that nature. So I would like to revisit that as well. I'm very familiar with a number of people in the central office at DEP. I know somebody's already spoke to someone there in the past, but I'd like some updates from them as well if the commission sees fit. Possibly revise the enforcement order and not start it from scratch, but kind of take a second look now that I'm here and seeing other things.
Jim, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Brad, so I have a feeling I'm going to learn an awful lot from you. Thank you. The floodway term was new to me. I don't live very far from this property. So from the street, you can see a earthen berm that is built up to protect that house from flooding. Does that have any impact on what we call the floodway?
So any time fill is placed in the floodway or floodplain, it has an impact. So I do recall that. I think I know the berm you're talking about. It seems fully vegetated at this point.
Yeah,
Is that something that's new, or like historically been there?
It's been there for as long as I can remember. So more than 10 years, I would say.
Yes. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I've been involved with a number of map updates over the years that FEMA has done. One of the first things I always look at, particularly for the septic system plan that we just saw as well, to make sure that, for instance, the elevation datum the engineers are using on their plans match what's on the FEMA flood maps. So I think when I did a quick cursory review of that, the flood maps I think were updated in 2011, which would really make probably that earthen berm a moot point at this point if it's historically been there prior to then. There's no going back to that particular creation or anything. What we could enforce and would have to look at, and it's important not just for the Conservation Commission, but for the town itself, like I said, to be able to participate in the flood insurance program, the town has to enforce floodplain encroachment for that purpose. And I want to try every angle I can to try to get this resolved.
Thanks, Jim. Bruce, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and Jim, you probably remember, this is a long time ago now, probably looking at 10, 12 years ago. There were a couple times where there were pretty massive floods within Bolton Road and Center Ridge Road. And I felt terrible for this particular property because I know at least one of those events, the water over the river had gone completely through the property at that time. So it just kind of goes to show how sensitive that property can be.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Thanks, Bruce. So Brad, do you want us to make a motion, or you feel like we're good? You understand what's going on and you'll get us an enhanced order. I will send you what I have. I have pictures that I've taken, 2 rounds of pictures I've taken, plus I have the previous pictures from Chairman Christopher and Agent Steves from last year. I can send all that stuff to you. If you can't find it, that's easy enough to do. Yes,
anything you have would be helpful. Like I said, particularly with enforcement, you want to make sure that everything's well documented. So when I have the pictures and look at everything we've done to date, then I can better talk to the state officials and come up with a better plan and present something to the commission at the next meeting. Okay. So I'll circle back with you and get those materials to you. Thank you. Commissioners, any further comments or questions on this topic? Seeing none. Next up on the agenda is Hawthorne Lane. I think, Jim, that we're done with this for now. Is that correct?
So let me just take a couple minutes on it, Tom.
Okay, just for full disclosure, I'm in a butter and I'm recused from this matter, so I'm going to step back and let Jim run this discussion.
Thank you. So, Commissioners, as you recall, at last meeting, we voted to accept the land transfer and put a CR on the property with a carved out envelope area for the pump house and access road. I spent a little time with Brad, catching Brad up to speed on what has transpired on this. And I'm not sure. I'd like, Brad, for you to share your thoughts about the CR, if that's needed or not. So right now, I know we need a little more research here, probably. So Brad, if you could comment.
Sure. I don't have much more to talk about than what we discussed in the office the other day. Yeah. I did reach out to Brian. Brian had some of his own questions. I basically reiterated the thoughts I had in terms of when you do and don't need a restriction, how municipal land is generally accepted for conservation purposes. A lot of general stuff we talked about. We were hoping to get together with the town administrator and further discuss that, but we haven't at this point yet. But that was the plan as of yesterday. But things got pretty busy, so we haven't had a chance.
So just so the commission members know, so no action on writing the CR yet. I think we will just stay tuned. Brad, you inform me when you learn more. Sound good? Okay, I think Mrs. Seidenberg, we can move on in the agenda.
Right. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
Next up on our agenda is Forest Legacy grant discussion. So I had this on the agenda because I have an open question as to whether or not we need to produce a slide for the town meeting. I don't know, Brad, if you got an answer to that question.
I did not get an answer to that. And I did attempt to have a meeting today with, is it Bob Lindstone? Right up, he's here.
He's
okay,
on.
Yep. And unfortunately, that wasn't able to happen. We were having technical difficulties. So, long story short, my office has been moved 3 times in the past 24 hours, roughly. So it was a little hectic. But things are working now, and we can hopefully move forward with everything.
So Bob, if you had some comments,
Yeah, just
happy to entertain them.
we're expecting a handout drafted by Janet Morrison for next week's warrant review meeting with the select board. And that will probably also be available at the town meeting. If a fancy projection thing is needed, we can start with that. If somebody wants to do that, it's not my skill.
Well, in the past, there's usually been, I don't know if it's always been for all articles, but there's often been like a slide for many of the articles that they just put up on the screen, when the article comes up, and then, the sponsoring board would have a few words to say. So if there's something, I will be happy to stand up and read what's ever on the slide and answer the questions from the citizens. Do you know if anyone from this project will be at town meeting and able to answer questions if there are questions?
I will certainly be there, willing to answer questions.
Okay.
I also know some people who are very good at making slides. I will provide the information from Janet to them and see what they can craft.
All right. Sounds good. So Brad, I guess if you could just find out, from Kate, whether this is something we have to do, then, we can figure that out.
Sure, absolutely.
Was there anything else, Brad, that we needed to discuss on this today? I think Bob did send us a prototype letter for the CRs. I did briefly look at that just before the meeting. So I was kind of surprised to see some of the language in that letter. Gives a number of duties to the commission that I feel like we haven't been in the past, we haven't really been doing, and maybe we should be doing. That's not to say that we're derelict in our duties. Let me share the letter. So I don't know if the rest of the commission has seen this yet. Where's the share screen button? Here we go. Okay, commissioners, can you see my screen? Can you see the letter?
Yes.
Pretty small though.
Yeah, it's actually a JPEG. So
That's better.
okay. So what I was noticing in this letter is that it establishes a duty for the commission to yearly inspect the properties that we hold under these CRs and send reports. And so, if this is indeed the form that we have to follow in order to accept these lands under this program, we need to make sure that this is tracked somehow. So just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention, that, even though the commission holds lands both in fee and with conservation restrictions, certainly in my time, I don't recall that we've been very diligent about monitoring our holdings. We've occasionally discussed them, but since we haven't had a consistent agent over the last few years, I wonder if some amount of monitoring has fallen by the wayside that we were doing before, maybe under Agent Kuntz, but now that's been lost to the annals of time. But certainly, if we take this CR under these kinds of restrictions, we need to be more diligent about following through with our responsibilities. I don't know, Brad, did you have a chance to see this? Do you have any comments?
I did see the email, but I haven't read through it yet. No.
Okay. I don't know if there's any kind of like list or tracking document that we might have in the office about things that the commission needs to do periodically. I've never heard of such a thing. I did discuss, I can't remember if it was with Charlotte or Brianna, starting a tracking spreadsheet. That was mostly in the context of open orders of conditions for things like verifying that replication plantings are checked, the following year. That so to remember that we have some things to do as part of our orders of conditions, and in the short-term requirements of our open hearings. But this is kind of a new wrinkle, and if we had such a tracker, that maybe this the obligations under this kind of CR, we could add to that. Jim, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks. I'm just looking at number 2, notify landowner of intent to enter the property. So that makes perfectly good sense, right? When the CR is on privately owned land. But if it's land owned by the commission, it seems that condition would not be there or should not be there. And land owned by the commission then maybe would not require an annual.
Right, yeah, so the context of this letter is specifically conservation restrictions. This wouldn't be, at least I don't think, Bob has his hand up, so maybe he can clarify, but I didn't think this letter was in relation to the lands the commission would hold in fee. Bob?
Okay.
That is correct for the lands that you hold in fee. In general, and especially in terms of the Forest Legacy Program. The Forest Legacy Program does not require a conservation restriction that is held by the Concom. David Kuntz used to, at least occasionally, inspect the other Forest Legacy parcel in town, the Land Trust Ballard Hill property, and because you're on the hook for that one. However, the state rarely comes out and double checks you. And when they do, as long as you send some certified letters to whatever violations they find, they seem to be satisfied. Had to do that only once. But yeah, it is an obligation that the Conservation Commission has to agree to, and it's at this point, if you're going to have multiple CRs to be responsible for, a list and some resources to monitor them would be necessary. So that's something to be aware of when we go to town meeting.
Yep. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah. There is one fly in the ointment that we're trying to get around. The big parcel in this whole project is the Bloodtown Forest. And the intent is to move it to the Conservation Commission ownership, which would not require a CR as far as Forest Legacy is concerned. So this letter would not apply to that. However, if we were to use the Community Preservation Act funds that are also on the town meeting agenda, on that part of the project, then there would be a requirement for a CR. And we could maybe do an end run by having somebody else hold the CR, although the land trust has demonstrated a complete incompetence in monitoring its one CR that it has. We wouldn't be the best choice, but hey, we're here. But what we're thinking of doing is using land trust funds for the compensatable, for the things that can be reimbursed, the reimbursable expenses, so that we don't use this Community Preservation Act money to get this done. And that, I think, is doable. I've got to get an estimate from Janet Morrison that I can get the Land Trust Board to bless. And then we will be able to not have you get stuck with this CR. That's the plan anyway. Any questions?
So I'm not sure that I followed that discussion, Bob.
Okay.
So I thought I heard you just say that potentially you wouldn't be, the Forest Legacy Project wouldn't be making use of the CPA funds we're going to vote at town meeting because of this letter specifically and the obligations it entails, or for some other reason?
Solely on the town forest land, the blood town forest land.
Okay, solely on the
That
okay.
That one, it would be awkward and expensive to write the CR. So it would make more because it's a big parcel. So it would make more sense for that to not use the CPA funds.
So I thought that parcel was, the intent was to transfer that in fee to the commission anyway.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. But if we use some CPA, any CPA funds for any of the expenses for title searches, surveys, whatever is necessary, then that would require us to do a CR, and we want to avoid that. So we're trying to avoid that. Don't have it nailed down yet.
So using that money prevents the transfer in fee. That is
no, it doesn't prevent the transfer in fee, but it requires an also CR.
Oh, also, okay.
Yeah, it seems redundant, but
I think I understand that.
I didn't write the law. Sorry.
Okay. Commissioners or Brad, any further comments or discussion? Seeing none, I think we can move on. Okay, next item on the agenda, we have 13 Neck Road, 40B project waiver requests relevant to the Conservation Commission jurisdiction. So I had solicited any further feedback from the commission. Just a quick recap where we left off at last meeting. Brian had told us that, you know, so the ZBA wants our comments with respect to whether we think the ZBA should grant a waiver against the wetland regulations. There was the specific question about the stormwater design and the direct connection to the municipal drain that runs into the Nashua. So there was, the question of whether that should be, I forget the exact terms, whether that should be a manhole or some kind of other structure that is better suited towards capturing the siltation. So I don't know, Brad, did you have a discussion with Brian about this project? Did he bring you up to speed on what the ZBA was looking for from us?
Nothing more than what we had briefly discussed. And again, my understanding based on what I've heard from people, was that all of the activity was outside of the commission's jurisdiction, but there was concern about the stormwater connection, which ultimately has a point source discharge to the river or close to it. So correct me if I'm wrong there. And then
That's correct.
Okay. So my concern with what was initially told in the quick glimpse of the plan that I had got was that the system was tied directly into a catch basin, which is something you don't ever want to do. You definitely want to either install another manhole there or somehow find an existing one to use. But anything that's in a catch basin, for a catch basin, you should only have the water coming from the street or a parking lot, falling right into the top of it, and then out an outlet pipe. You shouldn't have anything going into it because it's just going to get stirred up, and then all that's going to get pushed downstream.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Jim, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yep, thank you. So on the plan, I actually see 3 catch basins. It looks to me like 3 catch basins go into one drain. And then that's all outside the 200 foot from the Nashua River, but there's that direct pipe to the river, which, the drain discharges into the river. Then looking at the bylaw and the definition of alteration, it appears to me that this could be an alteration of the resource area. So, definition of alteration, changing of pre-existing drainage characteristics, flushing characteristics, and says more, drainage of other disturbance or other disturbance of water level, right? And then if there's any pollutants that are discharged directly into the river, that's an alteration. So I'm not sure that this is not regulated by the bylaw. And if it is, my reading is that it is, I would not favor a waiver.
So, we could certainly send comments to the ZBA that we're not in favor of the waiver, but I think that part of the problem with 40B in this respect is we kind of have to defend why the waiver is not, why they should not issue it, right? They have to do a weighing between the need for affordable housing in town and the regulations that we have that they're requesting the waivers for. So we need to have a good reason for that. The other point I would make is it's also very likely that if there was a violation under the bylaw, it would also be a violation under Wetlands Protection Act. And the ZBA can't grant a waiver from the Wetlands Protection Act. This is still going to be regulated fully under Wetlands Protection Act. While it is outside of jurisdiction, it would be after the fact jurisdiction if they were causing additional siltation or changes in characteristics. That certainly would be an after the fact violation. They can't escape that that outcome.
So it's outside the 200 foot buffer zone, right? But is it outside jurisdiction?
It is, yes. It's outside the 200 foot riverfront, bylaw riverfront. I don't even think that riverfront is a WPA riverfront. It's much farther than 200 feet from the Nashua. The riverfront that it has, I believe, is only bylaw riverfront to an intermittent stream. The same stream that comes out of the park behind Town Hall.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that is intermittent or by definition under WPA. I didn't actually check that. I've been assuming that it's just the bylaw stream. So anyway, so we have 2 questions. Before I ramble on further, Bruce, you've got your hand up. You want to add your comments?
Yeah, no, Brad had kind of mentioned this already, but the comments that were made in the last meeting by Brian, where they were mentioning about how converting that to a manhole. I think whatever we do, we got to make sure that we let them know our comments, that we suggest that, because if they've got this water that's cleaner and then it's going into the catch basin and then it's stirring up all of that sediment that's going to end up going into the river, and we want to help prevent that. So whatever we decide, I definitely think that our comments should be heard on that. That was a good recommendation, that would support that.
Thanks, Bruce. I agree that we definitely should send comments to the ZBA with respect to the better solution than what they had originally proposed. With respect to the waiver, I'm not sure. Brad, do you have comments on that?
So I haven't seen the waiver language. So I guess that's my first question, is exactly what the waiver request is, if everything's outside the zone in wetlands bylaw, for instance. WPA always applies to 40B, but zoning can get tossed out.
Yeah, so they specifically have requested a waiver from 306-1. And so that was my next point, was I don't even understand why they would ask for a waiver from that, because that's basically just the boilerplate and like top level description of the regulations, and the regulations, the actual details of the regulations are the other subsections in chapter 306. So they're not actually asking for a waiver from the regulations per se. Let me, I will share the YouTube. Yeah, so this is from their packet. So it seems to me they're specifically asking for 306-1, and that's really just the boilerplate. If I open up the, I mean, regardless, it seems their intent is to ask for a waiver from the entirety of the regulations. And if we just assume that that's what they're asking for, and talk about it in that context. So as you can see, they specifically asked for 306-1, and that's just the general provisions, but not all of the detailed pieces. But nevertheless, they're outside of jurisdiction. So I don't know what to say. I'd be happy to advise the ZBA that they shouldn't grant a waiver, because there's really no point. What would the waiver be? It would be a waiver against eventual enforcement. That doesn't make any sense to me, because they don't need to file, so they don't actually need to pay attention to anything in this section. I don't know. Brad, do you have any comments on that?
I think you just brought up a very good point. They don't, not haven't seen the plans in its entirety, but the consensus is it's outside the commission's jurisdiction in terms of filing. But in terms of an enforcement scenario, a lot of times you do have more teeth with your local regulations than you do the WPA, for instance. And I'd hate to see the commission lose authority should there be a problem once the site's under construction or something.
Bruce, go ahead.
I think that's kind of like what I've been thinking is like, right now it's non-jurisdictional. And if we were to, go ahead and help in this participation of granting a waiver of something that's non-jurisdictional, then when it becomes jurisdictional, then have we like waived our rights? So I think that's kind of my concern is that, right now it's non-jurisdictional and we really shouldn't be involved with this. Happy to, share different comments if they're looking for that. But I just wouldn't want them to come back later on if for some reason, God forbid, something goes wrong and it becomes jurisdictional. And now do we just waive our rights to being able to be involved when it comes to a jurisdictional situation?
Well, to be clear, we would still have all of our enforcement capabilities under the Wetlands Protection Act.
Even if we were to participate in this waiver, we still would?
Correct. Yeah. The
Okay.
ZBA
All right.
can't waive WPA.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So I don't mean to be difficult, but I just want to be really solid that it's non-jurisdictional. Because if it's an alteration to the resource area, it is jurisdictional. So why is it not an alteration?
So you're making the point, Jim, just to let me restate that because of their stormwater design, it's an alteration.
Yes, because of the discharge directly into the resource area. I mean, that alters what discharges into that resource area today. I get the feeling it would be much more volume.
Brad, do you have a comment on that?
Yes. I don't think it is an alteration at this point. I think you might have actually mentioned it earlier, Tom, this discussion part. It's not an alteration until it actually happens. So when something's outside of the commission's jurisdiction, under the WPA, you have the 8 interests of the acts. There's things that we want to protect, but you have to be in those either the resource areas or a regulated area in order to do that before a project actually happens. We know from looking at this project that yes, there's a potential that there could be some pollutants, there could be some alteration. I don't have any level of how much that is at this point, having only done a cursory review, but stormwater design, when it's done properly, most of the time you're going to meet the performance standards. Whether or not you are filing under a commission jurisdiction or not, most of these design consultants tend to try to apply the same standards across the board for consistency. In reality, most projects, very many projects, and the reason I've always been a proponent of local bylaws for wetlands is because in my experience, most of the violations, most of the violations I've seen impacting resource areas. One second, please. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that. Most of the impacts that I've seen are from construction sites that are well outside of a conservation commission jurisdiction. Things happen uphill. It's not something that's in the buffer zone or within a riparian zone or things of that nature. Construction just hits a paved area, hits a slope, creates a rill, and off it goes to a wetland. And that's been the bulk of my enforcement. It's not things that happen just in the buffer zone, for instance. Most of the problems I've seen with construction are things uphill. So I understand the concern that Jim has, but at this point, I don't think that the commission would have jurisdiction over it.
Thank you, Brad. That helps me.
So having heard all the comments, the way I'm feeling, and I'd be happy to have a response to this, I think that our comments to ZBA should go something along the lines of, we would prefer a better solution to the stormwater design. So I think Brian had suggested that they would alter that. And I think that we should, we definitely should request that the ZBA improve that so that they're not just dropping a whole bunch of stormwater into the catch basin that currently exists. I think we should also request that the ZBA not waive the bylaw rules and regulations for two reasons. First, they're not asking for specific waivers. They're asking for a blanket waiver, and I don't think that that's particularly useful. If they want a waiver for a particular reason, particular purpose, a particular aspect of the regulations, they should ask for that. A blanket doesn't really serve any obvious purpose. And then the second reason would be, well, it's outside of jurisdiction, so a waiver request is superfluous. So those are my thoughts. Those 3 points is what I would offer as comments to the ZBA. What do you guys think? Go ahead, Bruce.
I think you summed it up very well. I agree 100%.
Jim?
Yeah, excellent. Just so you're aware, Mr. Lidstone has his hand up too.
Yep, I've seen that. Go ahead, Bob.
Sorry, I'm trying to start. There we go. It's, again, I'm no expert on this, but I have been rather interested in the environmental side of the 40B process. It was my understanding that town bylaws, including wetland bylaws, have very little standing in the 40B process. So my recommendation would be to focus on the Wetland Protection Act stormwater management issues and put all your effort there. That's it.
Thank you, Bob. Any further comments or discussion from the commission? Seeing none. So Brad, the ZBA meets on Thursday. So I don't know, do you want me to write this letter up, or will you be able to take care of it?
I can draft it, and if you want to look at it, Tom, before it goes out, that's fine. I'm just trying to take work off your plate now.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. Stop sharing. Okay. Next up on the agenda, 7 Bridge Road correspondence. So Brad, remind me, this is a 61A right of first refusal.
Yes. And from what I saw, it looks like it was missing some things that I normally see, particularly, the purchase and sale agreement. It seemed pretty bare bones. I don't know what Lancaster normally gets with these, but I haven't seen a ton of them come across my desk in my years doing this. But I know there's always got to be the purchase and sale in place. And I think at one point we had to challenge one too with my previous employer because the P&S had conditions, things of that nature, and it can't have that as well. So it's something that just came in. I looked at it briefly, but I'm trying to hopefully rely on some more institutional knowledge in Lancaster and on what the process has normally been here.
Yeah, so we did have a resident reach out today to us and a number of the other boards, to the chairs, basically making that point that there was no purchase and sale, and so this isn't a valid right of first refusal request. So I think the issue is basically moot from that point of view. Just for some background, Brad, the larger parcel that this is being subdivided from, the commission already had previously voted 2 other lots were not interesting enough to the commission for the commission to recommend the select board actually exercise the right of first refusal. My personal opinion is the same on this lot, that I don't think there's enough value in retaining this lot from the perspective of, increasing our conservation lands and maintaining, adding to contiguous parcels or whatnot. But the resident did make the point that if this entire larger parcel just gets subdivided, then that will be a substantial loss from an agricultural perspective. And that is one of the interests that the wetlands bylaw seeks to protect. If we look at it in the context of, well, a couple acres here, a couple acres there, maybe they're not interesting by themselves, but when you start talking about 50 acres or 80 acres, I don't know, commissioners, what are your thoughts are at that point? Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
I guess the question would be, if you had say you had a small piece of land that was blocking development of a much larger piece of land, if that piece of land had significance in blocking a larger development, then it would be a lot more valuable. It'd be a lot more important. But if it's one where if you were to take over a piece of land, but there's another place that they can go through and still build that giant development, then I don't think that piece in and of its own has as much value. So I think it all depends on, what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to stop. If we're trying to protect agricultural land, if some other piece was to come up, we'd have to review it. But I don't think the pieces that we've looked at thus far, those aren't really blocking future development, are they?
I think they're just subdividing so that they can sell A&R lots.
Yeah.
Jim, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I do think you have to look at it cumulatively, right? So, the lots that we said no to, I think that, would still say no. But, if I look at what other lots could come up in the future, and if we could, kludge together some contiguous larger piece of property, that's a different story. Is something like that? Is that what you were alluding to, Tom?
Well, I don't know. I'm just raising the question. So this would be the third lot subdivided. Although I think that the time is not ripe for this discussion because there's not a purchase and sale.
Yeah.
So I was just taking the opportunity to have maybe a larger discussion. This parcel is 51 acres. The larger parcel that's being subdivided, I believe, is 51 acres. And it's currently under 61A, being farmed for hay, if I'm not mistaken. And it is adjacent to the Nashua River. Now, none of these parcels that have been subdivided are next to the river. But this property does have pretty significant Nashua River frontage. So I don't know if, given that there's no purchase and sale, and so this is probably not a valid request, I don't know that the commission needs to act on it. Brad, do you suggest we take a vote or just lay it aside?
If the commission can come to a consensus that they're not interested in a lot, regardless of whether or not it's been presented properly at this point, with the PS and other things they might need, and I think that part's a moot point. If you're disinterested in it, then you could probably take that vote now.
Okay, I see Jim and Dennis. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, Tom, is it Are you able to share your screen and show us
Sure.
the lot on the map? I think that will help.
Um, Okay, so the larger lot is this one, this large parcel. Does the letter have the letter somewhere? I don't know if the letter actually came with the plan. Okay. it
Yeah,
did.
it's the last sheet.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure. What is this? This is 269 7. Yeah, 289. Okay. So I guess the structure is the Kalon Farms store structure.
Okay.
So that's this structure. Yeah, so it would be, you know, this lot, right, this space right here between the Kalon Farms store and the neighboring home.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for showing us that.
Sure. Dennis, go ahead.
Yeah, so just continuing on what Jim said, this particular lot being between two homes already doesn't really concern me, but I think we need to continue to monitor this property as it gets, assuming it gets broken up more, to make sure that we are keeping those corridors to the river and to the wetlands. So again, this one particular one being right in between two already developed properties isn't of concern, but taking a look at that big picture, as I got a feeling this is going to get subdivided up more.
Yeah, so I guess I would say in response to that, Dennis, I agree. It being between two structures, I don't see that there's a lot of value to the commission to this particular lot, and I'd be happy to have a vote on that. But if we look a little forward, as you suggested, I think the commission should be more interested in having a discussion for this easterly part of the parcel, if any of this ever came up in the future, especially since we do own, we either own this in fee or I think where we have a CR for one of these three parcels. I'm not sure if it's this one that's marked in green, but it is one of these three we already own or have CR for. And I think the other one is owned by the state. But I can't recall. I did that research several months back. Bruce, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Sure, that easterly portion that you're talking about, do you know if that's in a flood zone at all, or?
Almost certainly. Yeah, it would have to be.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen all the flooding that's been in there over the years. And so what I'm just thinking is that, being in a flood zone like that, it might not ever be a piece that could be developed,
Yeah,
but I
certainly
do
not
agree.
buildable.
Yeah. So I do agree that we should, watch that area, but at the same time, it's not like there's going to be development there, which kind of helps us a little bit,
Yeah, but I think as we closer to Croach, so say they start coming down, subdividing up more and more down 117, right? Now we're making that the border across to the zones on the other side smaller. So I just think we need to continue to watch that corridor there, and there is a lot of farmland there that we got to be mindful of.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. So it sounds like we're probably not interested in this one. I'd be happy to take a motion for the commission to register its disinterest in this parcel.
I'm sure I'll make that motion that the commission is not interested in purchasing this parcel.
I will second.
All right, motion's been made by Jim and seconded by Dennis. To tell the select board we're not interested in exercising right of first refusal for the Seven Bridge Road parcel. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. This will be a roll call vote. Jim LaValle.
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard.
Aye.
Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
And Thomas Seidenberg also votes aye. Okay. Next up, we have National Grid maintenance correspondence. So this is just a letter informing us that they're doing some maintenance and that they're exempt. Brad, do you have any comments on this?
I don't have anything specific. I would imagine that the commission's seen a number of these over the years. It's very, very standard to what the utility companies give to the commission for this type of work. They are required to notify us, but the exemptions do apply.
Right. Thanks, Brad. So just to be clear, you don't think that we need to vote or anything on this?
No, they're just really, those letters are for, my understanding, having seen dozens of them over the years. It's just notifying us out of courtesy.
Yep.
Well, also, pointing out that they are exempt. So, but yes.
Yep. Okay. Thanks. So next up, oh, sorry, Jim, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that they did say they would restore any disturbed areas. So, yeah, I thought that was great. I think there's nothing for us to do.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Next up on the agenda, we still have an open seat on the commission. I haven't heard anything from anyone expressing interest. So hopefully we will find someone to come and join us every other Tuesday. Next up on the agenda,
Can I just make a comment on that?
Sure, go ahead, Bruce.
So my term is going to be coming up the end of June. And when I originally joined, I figured, because it's every 3 years, I thought 6 years was a lot, so I'd go 3 years. I hate to leave in the middle of any particular term, but if we're getting closer to June 30th and we're having, no one step up, I'm going to want to, I don't know how I renew or something like that. It might be something where I'm not going to go another 3 years. But it might be something where I stay on. Hopefully we can find somebody and then maybe post it again and find someone else. But I wouldn't want to leave on June 30th if you guys are in a bind. I wouldn't want to have just, the three of you guys and have to make every single meeting in order to get a quorum. So maybe we can discuss that sometime of how that would work. But hopefully we can get somebody on the commission because it's a great commission. I would think that there'd be some interest out there. But I just wanted to mention that since June 30th isn't that far away. So I just thought I'd mention that comment.
3 years is not that long.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for the heads up too.
Yep.
So the process is, I believe that Kathy Rocco reaches out to board members if they, some period before their terms are up. I don't know if it'll actually come through Brad instead, now that we have an agent again. And usually they just ask, are you interested in re-upping? And we'll be happy to have you even just for a partial term. I really appreciate that all of your efforts and your inputs while you've been on the commission, and I would be sad to see you leave.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good to me. Thank you.
Okay, next up on our agenda, the wayfinding signage grant. So Brad, want to bring us up to speed on what this is?
Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have any real information for the commission at this point. At some point last week when I was getting settled in, Brian had mentioned this was coming. We didn't have specifics on it, but he did mention that, that the town would be getting this up on their website at some point, getting information out there regarding the grant. So if I had some information, my plan was to present it to the commission. That's why I threw it on the agenda anyway. But at this point, really all I have to report is that it will be forthcoming.
Okay. So
Sorry
I
about
can,
that.
no, I can give a little background for the commission. So about a month or two ago, I was contacted by the group that's doing the grant. They were reaching out to stakeholders in town. What they were doing was they were soliciting feedback for literally wayfinding and signage. So, like signs, I offered comments that, it would be nice to have signs at all of the commissions, owned lands. Essentially it was all about signage. They were coming up with with a consistent theme for the town. So all of the signs would look the same, kind of like branding in that sense. I believe it was being driven ultimately out of the planning board, but I'm not positive. Maybe it was being driven out of the Office of Community Development Planning. That part I wasn't clear on. My belief was that the grant was only to do the analysis and the branding, and that the money didn't actually include anything for the actual signs. So I thought that once they had done all of their information gathering, they would, basically produce, I don't want to minimize it, but, produce the logos or the styles, the basic scheme. And then if the town wanted to actually buy all the signs, that would be an additional appropriation. That was my impression. I don't know where they are in the process. Like I said, I spoke 1 or 2 months ago with them. If they're asking us for where we might want the signs, I think that would be great. We would need to do a good inventory of our lands, and maybe where there's parking. Some of our conservation lands do have included parking, like Cook Conservation, the Pelekia area, obviously the Bartlett Pond, Town Forest, although it's not Concom's yet, but it might be in the future. But I think some of the other lands that Concom has don't really have any signage, or maybe even any parking. So that's something we should probably understand. So maybe that's what part of this item is. Any comments or questions? All right, moving on. Let's see, that's the end of our discussion agenda. Next up, we have minutes for March 26th. Did folks have a chance to review the minutes? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I reviewed. I just found one thing under discussion, number 6. It's just an incomplete sentence. It says Kendra Dickinson, comma, and then nothing. So I would just delete that part. Everything else is fine.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Yeah, I found, sorry, go ahead, Dennis.
Nope, go ahead with yours.
Yeah, I found 6 or 7 items that I emailed to Roz just before the meeting. There was, I think Bruce's name was misspelled, my name was misspelled, and there were a couple of trivial typos. Go ahead, Dennis.
I also found in, it was item 4, continuation note of intent for 310. It had myself listed for both the motion and the second. That can't be.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I can't find my hard notes from the day to see which one of those is real. I'd have to go back and watch the video, but we need to correct that too.
Okay. Jim and Dennis, if you could send your comments directly to Roz so that she has them so she can update the minutes.
Yep.
That'd be great.
Okay.
And that, okay, so let me enumerate my list of edits just for the record so we can approve the minutes with edits. Let me find my sent email. So my edits. So I mentioned the two names. Clayton A is Clayton Arvinson. It was select Bard instead of select board, and it was notice of intent without the E. Yeah, so those were my edits. So I'd be happy to take a motion to approve with the edits just mentioned.
Yeah, I move that we approve with the edits that we mentioned in the meeting today. None of those are about content, really.
Right. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
I'll take Dennis. So motion was made by Jim, seconded by Dennis to approve the minutes from March 26th with edits. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Jim LaValle.
Aye.
Dennis Hubbard.
Aye.
Bruce McGregor.
Aye.
Tom Seidenberg also votes aye. And that brings us to the end of our agenda.